Hello. It's an honor to be here at the P3 Airport Summit, and I want to thank Tyson for the opportunity to talk about a process that will help bring your project in on time and on budget. My name is Elizabeth Tippin, and I'm an attorney, arbitrator, mediator, and dispute board practitioner based in San Francisco. I'm also the president-elect of the Dispute Board Resolution Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering the use of dispute boards around the world. Next slide, please. Let me introduce our speakers today. First, we have Deb Maston, who is an attorney, mediator, and arbitrator and dispute board practitioner from Florida. She was previously the assistant county attorney for Miami-Dade and Broward counties in Florida. Hal McKittrick has a 50-year history as a professional engineer and contractor, now is a consultant, arbitrator, and mediator and dispute board practitioner from Virginia. And Robert Cedeno is an attorney, arbitrator, dispute board practitioner from Florida. He combines a hybrid form of professional services of legal and construction engineering for an integrated result. We are all here to share our knowledge about using dispute boards on airport projects. Next slide, please. So what is a dispute board? It's also known as a dispute resolution board or a dispute review board. It's a panel of impartial professionals, typically 1 to 3 members, a combination of engineers, architects, and construction attorneys or neutrals. The dispute board panel is selected at the beginning of the construction of a project to follow the construction progress by meeting regularly at the project with the owner and the general contractor representatives. Could be every month or as often as the parties agree, combined with a site visit so that they can actually see the status of construction. The process is flexible to meet the needs of each project. During COVID-19, as construction moved forward, dispute boards continued to meet regularly on projects using Zoom and other platforms, along with site visits that were shown via photographs, videos, and even drone videos from above. The goal of a dispute board is to encourage dispute prevention and avoidance by proactively discussing with the parties issues that come up on the project. The dispute board also assists in the resolution of disputes by providing informal opinions regarding potential issues and formal written opinions to resolve disputes. Dispute board is actively engaged in the entire construction of the project, resolving issues real time as the project progresses. So at the end of the project, all conflict has been resolved. The dispute board process was developed by tunneling engineers in the early 1970s, who initiated a study and found that the rapidly escalating construction costs was a result of disputes and resulting litigation. The first dispute board was the second bore of the Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado in 1975. Compared to the litigation process after the project was completed, a dispute board was a resounding success. Today, dispute boards are used around the world to avoid and resolve disputes on construction projects of all kinds, using all different types of project delivery methods. I'd like to now turn the microphone over to Deb to talk about her experience and her recommendations of using dispute boards on airport projects. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So let me tell you why I'm here, why I'm talking to you. This is North Terminal Development at Miami International Airport, and this was my second dispute board. I was a government lawyer for almost 35 years, and 15 of those years were spent at Miami International Airport. And 2 years after that, I was at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport as the in-house counsel for the government owner for those airports. And my co-panelists were my dispute board members. So we're here to talk about success stories with you. I had been working with the county for many years as their construction attorney, capital improvements attorney, and we were looking for a better way to resolve disputes. I'm sure none of you have litigation budgets in your project. That's not how we start projects. Litigation is expensive. It means that the project has probably run quite late and that the budget for the project has already blown, and that staff time is being directed and diverted from ongoing activities to fixing things that happened in the past. And so we needed a different way of addressing construction management issues. At the request of our successful proposer, we agreed to implement a dispute board on Miami International Airport North Terminal project, which was a $2 billion construction project that we had problems. We had American Airlines was our tenant developer. We amicably separated that relationship and severed it, and took over the completion of the terminal ourselves. And we put in a dispute board because when we reprocured and negotiated the new contract with the construction manager, they suggested to the airport director that having a dispute board would lower the price. It would make the price more competitive and affordable. And that was very attractive to my airport director, so we did it. I will tell you that the dispute board met monthly. No lawyers attended the meetings ever. There were no hearings. There were no mediations. There was no arbitration and no litigation. There were plenty of change orders, but they were all amicable. All the parties bought into the changes that needed to be made decisions about how those changes needed to be made in the monthly meetings with the dispute board members. The meetings were professional, they were amicable, and now I'm telling you things that my staff told me because I wasn't there. And at the end of the project, this project won a gold award from the Construction Owners Association of America for exemplary project management during the construction phase. So based on that success, the county implemented dispute boards in many of its subsequent projects. And when I moved to Fort Lauderdale Airport, Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport also implemented dispute boards on its construction projects. Its first project with the dispute board was much smaller than this. It was a pilot project because they wanted to test the waters and see how it would work. So they chose a $2 million project for their dispute board. And they were so happy with the result that the project was not contentious, it stayed on time, on budget, that they decided to implement dispute boards in all their subsequent projects, which they call dispute avoidance panels. We created our own specification, and we allowed the process to run out. It became a very effective project management tool, and I became a believer. This was the most effective way that I have seen to amicably and civilly manage issues, unforeseen issues that come up on projects. All projects, especially large, complex infrastructure projects, airport projects, projects at operating airports have unforeseen events. You know, there are underground conditions, things change. FAA regulations or other authorities having jurisdiction regulations change. the operational needs of the airport tenants, the airlines, and the retail support that goes into terminals changes. The construction needs have to adapt to the needs of the users of the terminal. And having the regular monthly review meetings with the dispute board members allowed the project to stay on time, on budget, in control, allowed people to make reasoned plans about what modifications needed to be made. And we allowed all the stakeholders to be part of the process. Let me see the next slide, please. So what I learned from this first airport dispute project, which is now more than 10 years old, is that in order to get a good dispute board experience, you pick good dispute board members. I mean, that is a key. Investigate your appointments and have them meet, use them. You know, the airport director at one point said to me, well, let's stop having these meetings. We're not having disputes. What do we need to have meetings just to have meetings for? I went, no. You're not having disputes because we're having the meetings. The meetings are what ameliorates the disputes. We had no claims on this job, which was remarkable because it was a very, very messy job. If you wait for a dispute to arise before you hold the meeting, you've lost the opportunity to mitigate in real time things that could have made the problem smaller or non-existent. It prevents you from collaboratively deciding how to restructure the project to minimize the impact to the users. One example I will leave you with is at one point the project did fall behind, and we had a meeting, they had a meeting to discuss how to make up the lost time on the project. And the choices were to close down the terminal completely and have 3 shifts running, or to keep the terminal operational for a much longer period of time, many months longer, and just have 1 or 1.5 shifts working on the job. And honestly, as the owner, the county didn't care. The price was essentially the same either way. And the construction manager really didn't care because they were getting paid either way. The people who cared were the airlines and the retail establishments that were within the terminal. And they, not parties to the contract, but they were invited to the meeting to hear the issues, hear the concerns, hear the obstacles, and participate in the decision on which way to move forward to finish the terminal. And there was an enormous amount of essentially customer satisfaction because they were informed, they had input, and the process was considered under our specification to be confidential as a settlement agreement. So I'm losing track of my time. How am I doing for time, Elizabeth?
You're about there.
I'm about there. All right, then
a minute or so.
I will hand it off to my co-panelists. And I do have a slide at the end that is a takeaway for you. Further resources for dispute board matters. You can learn about it. There are sample specifications you can look at that are online, and we've given you that slide that will be in your materials and are part of the program, and you can check them at any time. So thank you.
Thank you, Deb, for your advice on using effective management tool of dispute boards. I'd like to turn the microphone over to Hal right now. And Hal, could you talk about your experiences and recommendations of using dispute boards on airport projects?
Yes, and coincidentally, I have a very good project to use as an illustration. It is the Fort Lauderdale Airport runway, a new parallel runway that was installed in 2014. It's quite an interesting project. It can see, if you look at the picture in the screen, if you look south, you're looking toward Miami. To the left of the picture is the shipping channel where cruise ships are parked. To the right of the picture is what was the existing airport at that time and interstate highways. So because of the proximity to the shipping channel, it was necessary to have a embankment at that end of the project at a 60-foot height. So this required the import of about 6 million cubic yards of material, most of which was brought in by train and unloaded by excavators. So it was quite interesting. There was a controlled fill because it was on a compressible subsurface material. It was monitored for settlement before other lifts could be placed. The other part of the project, as you can see looking at the picture, is the structure that traversed US Route 1. It traversed the railroad and access and egress roads from the airport. So this is a runway and taxiway that traversed live traffic. I have been in airports where the taxiways have traversed traffic, but I've never been in one where a runway traversed live traffic. In any event, the contract, the owner selected this. I will have the next slide, please. The owner decided that there would be 3 major contracts. One was an earthwork contract, the embankment. The second was that was a design bid build. The second was the structure contract, which was design build. And the third was a paving contract. Now, the one critical thing on this project, the most critical thing, was the opening date of the runway. This was a substantial investment by Broward County, and the reason was they felt that there was a market to expand their airport and capture a lot of the traffic that came south to Florida for the winter. So there was a mandated opening date of September 18th, 2014. And any of you who have dealt with the FAA know if you miss a date by a week or two, that doesn't mean a week or two to the FAA. That might mean 3 months, it might mean 6 months. And with this huge investment by the county, you've lost that particular season. So it was very critical that this runway open on time. So there is, because of that criticality, and because of the fact that the different contractors would have to interface with each other, the owner decided that there would be one DRB or DAP, and I'm going to use the phrases interchangeably: DAP, Dispute Avoidance Panel, DRB, Dispute Resolution Board. I'll use them interchangeably, but they're all the same. But there were 3 contracts, but there was a lot of interfacing with the contractors. For instance, the fill behind the abutment was to be placed by the structures contractor. You couldn't, require the embankment contractor to do that. There would be a traversing of different contracts by the contractors. So so we wanted one board familiar with all the contracts and all the issues on the contractors. And because of the criticality of keeping the project moving and getting issues resolved, we were meeting once a month. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. When we were seated on the project, unfortunately, we were seated late on the project, but the fill contractor or earthwork contractor was roughly a little over a third complete in money earned and about a third of the time. So the fill earthwork contractor was pretty well on schedule. And whenever there was a lag in schedule, addressed it aggressively to catch up. The structure contractor was it was design build, and that was two things about that contract. I think of all the 3 contracts, it was the most technically difficult. There was a much greater reliance on subs. If you refer back to the picture of the box structures, there were a lot of life safety issues and systems within the structures that had to be addressed. And the designer, it was a design build, and the designer was required to interface with a lot of different agencies, local and AHJs, authorities having jurisdiction. So it was a much tougher contract in retrospect. In addition to that, when we were empaneled on the project, the structures contractor was behind schedule, significantly behind schedule, and that was an issue, and it was mostly due to productivity issues and some supply issues. So one thing I want to just read before I get into too much more detail, read what we were supposed to do as a DAP. And this is the essence of what a DRB is. We were to assist in the prevention of disputes between the owner and its various construction contractors, to assist in the resolution of disputes and claims between the owner and the contractors. The intent of the establishment of the panel was to facilitate a contemporaneous agreement as to the resolution of events, emphasis, during the progress of the work. And if agreement could not be quickly reached, then to fairly and impartially consider the disputes and provide written recommendations to the parties. So basically, this is the story. Address the issues, get the issues resolved during the project. What we did as a contract, as a panel, first of all, we had to learn about the project. We had to learn about the people. The people had to learn about us. The people had to understand what a DRB was. And at first, there was a great hesitancy to open up in meetings and discuss what was going on. And actually, that in previous meetings, there had been some the suppression of open discussion. So one thing we worked on immediately was getting open discussion of issues every month. And we didn't just watch the world go by. We set benchmarks for what are you going to accomplish with this issue by the time we sit down here next month. If you don't have it next month, when are you going to have it? Why can't you have it next month? And so we addressed the issues on a monthly basis. A big part of our agenda was an issue list. And where are you on the issues? The other thing that we had a little, as I said, it was that the parties began to understand exactly what we did. Now, the result of the structure contract was that essentially we had issues that parties couldn't agree on. So we, in the course of that project, we had 4 hearings. We had what I call formal hearings. We had 5 advisory opinions. And at the end of the project, and it did overrun time, but it did not affect the opening of the runway. There were other parts of their work that were not finished on time. After completion of, just at the completion of a final hearing on a time extension, the parties negotiated their differences and settled. Now, with the paving contractor, we, of course, were on the site for the full length of the project. And there were also we also had 2 hearings on that, mostly related to time. And that also settled at the end of the project. So the bottom line is that there were some contentious moments, but the parties got the job done on time. They gave the owner what the owner really needed. That runway opened by the 18th of September 2014, and there was no aftermath in litigation. Next slide, please. Now, lessons learned. I'm absolutely convinced that the DRB avoided many disputes. There's too many of these projects where people put the disputes aside, will settle it at the end of the job. Doesn't happen. bad strategy. We got things out on the table. We got them addressed during the project. And the big thing, I think, is we took the heat off the parties because we were there to handle the disputes if it got to us. And they didn't have to just take a lot of their energy posturing and preparing for subsequent litigation. Obviously, I echo what Debbie said earlier. You've got to seat the panel at the project start. The panel needs to know the people, know the history. There has to be a relationship established as soon as possible. One of my suggestions is I feel that the party should have the DRB train the field personnel in DRB. So at least they have an understanding of what they are. And look, I've done many of these little seminars for the different ASCE societies, and you can make a presentation in an hour or two, which would inform the parties as to really what we do. Three-party agreement. I think there should also always be a three-party agreement. And one other thing I am an advocate of is making the parties pay equally for the use of the DRB. There are many contracts that the owner pays all of the regular meetings, and there's only a 50% split when there's a hearing. I don't believe in that. I think we should make both parties pay equally, and so they're equally invested. Parties should collectively select the DRB, again, so there's a common interest in who's selected. And as Debbie said earlier, my last recommendation is keep the DRB for the length of the project. I don't know how many times I've heard of, oh, well, the project's 60% complete. We really don't have any disputes. We don't need the DRB. It's too costly. Go home, DRB. In a year, the DRB gets a call. We have about 50 issues that have boiled up, and we have a global hearing that we need you people to spend about a week or two at. So it's good insurance to have the DRB. And as far as cost, if you read the DRBF manual that Elizabeth is going to talk about later on, it indicates the cost of a DRB is about 0.1 to 0.2% of the project cost. Our own experience at Lauderdale is the actual cost, hearings and all, was 0.12% by my calculations. With that, I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Hal, for talking about dispute avoidance panel, a term used for 3 contracts on one project. Excellent. Thank you. I'd like to turn the phone over to Robert. Could you please share your tips and your best practices with dispute boards for airport projects? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, let me start off by saying, so that the participants at this conference can understand, we are using some acronyms here, DRB, DAP. They're all the same thing. When I practiced throughout the Caribbean, it's called DAB, Dispute Adjudicative Board or Adjudication Board. That name has changed to DAAB, Dispute Avoidance and Adjudicative Board. It's all the same thing. There's minor differences in the two, in all the different names, but they all have the same concept. I have served on over 100 of these boards on whatever name they decide to call it, whether it's DRB, DAB, DAP. But the long and short of the story is that the value in this process is really the avoidance aspect. And I hope I could get this across with my presentation. So let me start by talking about the Miami Intermodal Center. It's the same airport that Debbie spoke about. What it is that this was an extension to it. We had a rental car facility, we had roadways, we had a core facility, we had pump stations, people mover, tri-rail relocations, site utilities, major tri-rail stations. It was a combination of many projects. What was unique about this, however, is that there was one DRB on this project. I was the chairman of the DRB, and it was very challenging to try to figure out all these various projects. This was actually a CM at risk project. So there was a lot of money at stake. You needed to understand the contracts properly, owner's account, owner's allowance, contractor's allowance. So it's very important that the members, and we heard it earlier on, that in selecting the members, you've got to select people with the right background that can understand. Now, I am a professional engineer as well as an attorney. So for me, I understand both the technical and the legal side of it. So it's very important to understand the type of contract you're working with, because in the avoidance of dispute or the ultimate resolution of it, the contract plays a major role in it. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. This is the Fort Lauderdale Airport, which again, I actually served at that Miami International Airport from 2009 to 2012. At 2012, I was selected as the chair again for Fort Lauderdale Airport, and I served on that from 2012, and I'm presently still the chairman of that DAP. That project's supposed to end sometime at the end of this year, early next year. But nonetheless, this project at Fort Lauderdale Airport had various types of contracts. Again, it's very important for the DRB, DAP to understand the type of contracts you're dealing with. For example, this project was the terminal section of what Hal just spoke about. Hal was on a DAP that handled the runway projects. I was the chair of the DAP that handled the terminal project. So this was they split the terminal into two sections: Terminal T4 East, Terminal 4 East, Terminal 4 West. Then there was the apron that connected both sides. Then there was a hydrant fueling contract. There was a railroad relocation, a federal inspection service, a FIS, onto the airport that was added because of the increased volume. This was by change order. And then in the midst of all of this, all the baggage handling systems needed to be addressed accordingly. So it was an array of projects for which the DAP had to be knowledgeable and involved in. It started off with the first OS being a CM at risk. T4, the other projects was a low bid. When I say a low bid, I mean design bid build, traditional design bid build. So the concepts, the dispute avoidance techniques, the questioning is different depending on the type of contracts you're dealing with. So it's very important that you understand the type of contract. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so what was the role of the DRB? No, please, can you go back? Can you go back one slide? Yes, the role, what was the role of the DAP on these various packages? Those circles that I show on the right is something that I thought of using the Venn diagram in math long ago. The intersection of all these principles is where the DAP falls right in the middle of, okay? Now on this particular project at Fort Lauderdale Airport, I thought it was very unique because Deborah Mastin wrote a unique DAP spec. And that spec actually required the chairman of the DAP to be a certified mediator in the state of Florida. I thought that was very innovative. I think that is a state of the art and a cutting edge approach. Why is that? Because one, you maintain confidentiality of the questions within the DAP meetings as well as the hearings. And secondly, you have someone that is trained in asking probative questions that are neutral in nature and not on no one side it feels that intimidated. Now I have sat on many of these boards where sometimes the questions from the DRB, DAP tend to lead in one direction or the other. But by having a neutral facilitator as the chair is a very innovative approach. So what was our role based on that context, that spec? Because everything our performance is driven by the types of contracts and also by the DAP specifications, which change, believe me, from project to project. Al spoke about the compensation. I've been on many projects where I am also the sole DAP. The compensation is completely different. On three-party DAP, it's also different. Who pays for it, how it's shared. But our role in general, and to get the best out of the DAP, is to have a situation like this diagram I have in front there, where we can facilitate the avoidance and resolution of disputes. We can prevent them by asking probative and pertinent questions. And then if they cannot avoid the issue, then we can go ahead and resolve it. Now, I have On many of these packages, we were able to avoid all the disputes. Some of them, we end up having to have hearings. In fact, on one of these projects now, we have about 15 hearings lined up. It could be a posturing position, but nonetheless, each of these issues will turn on the other. So you got to be very cognizant of the entire thing. So the role of the DAP is really to get an efficient DAP. When we meet at the airport once a month, the first day is very hectic because we have to understand every single project there, T4 East, T4 West, what is going on each one in order to ask appropriate questions. Why do we need to understand that? Because then we can ferret out the issues. Would one project impact the other? We are the neutral, we are transparent, we are above, we get to see all packages. Then we participate objectively on one package. If there's a change on one package that will result in an extension of time, the subsequent package might in turn be subject to that extension. So what can we do to what questions can we ask to help the participants understand what is around them and how they can improve on their performance, not to impact the entire program. In order to be able to perform these functions, the DAP members, as we said earlier on, must be interviewed properly. Why? Because you need specialized knowledge on some of these things. You've got to ask the right questions. The questions you will ask and the baggage handling system will be different to the questions you will ask on the apron project, on the embankment project. Why is that? Because with experience, you would have known what are some of the key and critical elements in the development of a project. And looking at the project in real time helps you to be able to formalize and conceptualize questions that are substantive in nature that will cause the parties to think about it. I have seen where we ask questions and I see everyone at the table just step back and say, wow, we never thought about that. Okay, well, let's move on. Now we have a little time to think about it. That to me is a good form of value that we are adding to the project. Also, there are some of these packages that finish before others. They have similarities, so we can transfer within the program lessons learned in real time, not just from other projects, but on the airport on the same particular project. What that does, it helps us to prevent and to mitigate and to resolve future issues. And most importantly is the last bullet I have there. By the DAP being in a position to understand what's going on all packages, we are in a unique position to avoid unnecessary posturing to any one package, or even from the owner's perspective or the contractor's perspective, to gain leverage on negotiation. So we will ask questions that make it quite clear that we understand what's going on and everyone on the table should understand it, including all the other packages that they are not involved in. Next slide, please. Next slide. So to conclude, I think it's a very good idea to strategically have one DAP on a few projects if they're all interrelated. Why? Because there's value in that system. It serves to put the DAP in a neutral position to really add value in terms of avoidance and in terms of resolution of the dispute. But more importantly, from the party's perspective, it creates a high productivity for the DAP. I'm telling you, we work from morning, from 8, we have DAP meetings all the way till 5 o'clock on 4 or 5 different projects. So it's a constant value and the highest productivity you can get from the DAP member. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Elizabeth. This was a practical approach. I mean, there's a lot of lessons that I could share, but I know we are constrained with time here. So let me just hand it back over to you. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to suggest some responses.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Could I have, okay. Thank you for the tips and advice, the certified mediator and the mediator qualities that can really add to mediation qualities that can really add to the dispute board process. I have a slide up right now showing the dispute board manual. It's a guide to best practices and procedures, and it is available if you want to find out more about dispute boards and how to create them for your project. There is a free download of our manual on the DRB website, which is listed there, drb.org. You can also go to that website to find out to get information on specifications for writing dispute boards into your contracts. There is a project database which has over thousands of projects that have successfully used dispute boards. You can also do a check on members, and you can find practitioners that are specialized in the area of construction that you're looking for. So it's a great organization. We have a annual conference that's coming up in February or in the end of October, which will be virtual, and go to the website to get that information. So I just want to thank all of our panel members just in the last minute here final slide. This is a slide that Deb put together, which is really some resources for dispute board information. The Dispute Board Foundation, AAA, ICC, FIDIG, where all of these organizations support dispute boards in some fashion or another. Either they provide panels or they provide rules, and you can go to those. Those are just some resources you can use. I want to thank all of our panel members today for giving us information about using dispute boards on airport projects, tips and their experiences. We've put a slide up with everybody's email. Please feel free to reach out to any of us for questions or additional information regarding using dispute boards. Thank you all for participating.